Thanks for joining us on episode 711 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, a special rebroadcast of episode 116, the last of a four-part interview with Shannon Mills.
I'm Shannon Miles from Belay. I challenge you to discover your calling and find your third option so you can be empowered to live every day to the fullest. One way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader. And we've seen it, right? We've seen people who don't take care of themselves and they burn out and they leave this bomb and shrapnel that's affected everybody, when if small adjustments were made along the way and they actually took care of themselves, they would have been a much more effective leader, business owner, husband, wife, father, mother, whatever.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's interview with Shannon Miles from Belay, I asked Shannon about how stretching yourself can help you make an impact. What are the top principles that will allow you to make a dent in the universe, and the legacy that Shannon hopes to leave, and lots more. One reason I like to bring you great interviews like the one you're going to hear today is because of the power in learning from others. Another great way to learn from others is through reading books. But if you're like most people today, you find it hard to find the time to sit down and read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and instead of reading, you can listen your way to learn from some of the greatest minds out there. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. Shannon Miles is the CEO of Belay Inc., a Inc. 500 fastest growing company and winner of Culture IQ and Entrepreneur's #1 Company Culture Awards. Since 2010, the company has grown to nearly 700 team members and serves nearly 1,000 clients on a daily basis. Whether through team development or balanced mentoring, Shannon is passionate about serving others and inspiring them to live life more fully, while firmly remaining her own worst critic. While on Necker Island with Richard Branson, she learned that if your dreams don't scare you, they simply aren't big enough. Shannon lives in Atlanta with her family. Shannon, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shannon, it's clear that you've set out to not only make an impact, but help others make an impact on the world. One thing that you talk about in the third option is this idea of stretching yourself as something that you've always done as part of your approach to work. How much do you think that this attitude of stretching yourself has had to do with the impact that you've made on the world?
Oh, I think it has a lot to do with it. I didn't get into it too much in my book, but I grew up pretty poor. We always had enough to eat, but we didn't have a lot of extra. And I had this almost like go for broke mentality when Brian and I started the company, because I could just reflect back to when I was younger, like I didn't have much. And if, starting Belay meant we had to risk it all, and if it didn't work, I could go back to not having much and be fine too. So I think that mentality of putting yourself out there, even before you're prepared or qualified or know all the answers to all the questions, you have to. That's the beauty of risk. You put yourself out there and you figure it out along the way. You don't have to be flippant. You don't have to take unnecessary risks. But at the same time, the reality is you never fully know everything. So you're learning constantly along the way. And so I just would encourage it, the listeners, that if you're on the fence about something and you maybe there's a nagging idea or a concept that just won't go away, there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. And it's worth your time and energy to figure out if it's something you should pursue.
One of my mentors, one of his favorite expressions that he's constantly telling those of us that he mentors is leap and build your wings on the way down.
Yeah, that's so true. We've said at Belay, like we're building the rocket ship as it's taking off.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's scary, but it's also true that if you always prepare, you'll never do.
So true. Mm-hmm. So true. I don't know if you experienced this when you made the leap to start your consulting business, but for us, like the calling was so strong to start the company that it was almost irresponsible not to. And I know that sounds crazy because for Brian and I, we quit our jobs on the same day. We used our 401ks to fund the business. We took a 50% pay cut. We had, at that time, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. It was in the middle of the recession. Like none of it made sense, right? But we were so convicted that this was the right thing to do that it would have been irresponsible not to follow that calling.
No, I agree. I think the fear of not doing it becomes so great, or the drive to do it becomes so great, whichever way you want to phrase that, because it's kind of flip sides of the same coin, that at some point it's just like, I can't not do this. I have to. Hopefully you prepared before then so that it's not a scary leap, but at the same time, it's always going to be a scary leap because you never feel ready.
And it's so funny, I worked for a large corporation and I honestly thought, Scott, that I was going to retire from there. I was like, I loved my job. I loved my team. It was in healthcare. So I had this bigger calling that we were helping people, and that felt very secure. But when this seed got planted in my heart and Brian's heart to start the company, and we knew it was time to go, it felt like a huge risk, and it was. But the reality is, 18 months after I left, half of my team got laid off. And a few years later, my whole division was sold. And so what seemed like this permanent, stable company that I was going to ride to retirement, it wasn't. And I think the same is true for a lot of people. There's this perception of stability by staying and doing what you always done. But the reality is it may not be. It may not be the stable option. The better option may be to bet on yourself and branch out and do your own thing.
Talking about that, if someone really wants to make a dent in the universe, that's one of my favorite ways of expressing, making an impact. What are the top 2 or 3 principles that we should learn to be able to do that, to make that impact?
I think self-care is so very, very important. It's not selfish care, but it is self-care. I think if you are not growing and investing and taking care of yourself, then it is very difficult to go out and make that dent in the universe if you're depleted. And we've seen it, right? We've seen people who don't take care of themselves and they burn out and they leave this bomb and shrapnel that's affected everybody, when if small adjustments were made along the way and they actually took care of themselves, they would have been a much more effective leader, business owner, husband, wife, father, mother, whatever. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is being in service to others, regardless of your vocation. I think if you are a leader, you are serving other people. And I think when you don't have to have the title of CEO to be a leader, right? We lead in different ways, but it is all about serving others and really inspiring them to achieve their greatest potential. And it goes back to the self-care thing. If you're not doing that yourself, it's almost hypocritical to inspire others in that way.
So Shannon, here's the really tough question. If you could travel into the far future, maybe 50, 100 years, and you look back on your life, what's the impact that you hope you've had on the world?
That is the hard question. I hope that I've inspired other people. I hope that, as I said with the company, that I've left people better off than I found them, in the sense that we're all better having had relationship with each other. I have 2 amazing kids. I hope that they have left a legacy by that point as well. And it sounds crazy, but I really hope that I can just inspire some people to make a change in their life that brings about good in the world.
What's next for you as you continue on your journey to live out your call and to make an impact on the world?
I'm still getting a lot of really cool opportunities as a result of the book. And I'm excited to see what platforms will emerge from that. Certainly speaking is something that is obvious, like it would be an obvious win, to be able to speak to audiences and have a greater reach. I hope someday that Oprah and I can just sit and have a cup of tea and hang out for a while. Like, I love her so much. And I'll just throw that out there. You never know what's going to happen until you throw it out there. Right, Scott?
Absolutely.
Brian and I own Belay together, and we've been married now almost 21 years. We're about to celebrate our anniversary. And being married is awesome, but it's work. It can be difficult at times. And owning a business is awesome, but it is also work and can be difficult at times. And then doing both of those things together is doubly difficult. And so I hope someday that when the business needs us less and less, that Brian and I can develop some type of program to help husbands and wives who own and run a business together really be able to balance it all and learn from some of the things that we've done well and some of the mistakes that we've made along the way.
There's definitely a need for that. I know, from my wife and I who run our business together, and then I've got friends that run a business with their spouse, and it is a challenge. There's a huge need for having things out there that can resource and equip, because that's not something that I think was the norm for a long time, but it has become much more common in today's world, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And when you work from home like we do, that compounds it even more, because there's no separation at all between your business, your family, your marriage. It's just all blended together, which can work really well, but it can also be a challenge that a lot of couples just have never faced before and could use help navigating.
Absolutely. When you do get closer to that, make sure you let us know, and I'll pass that along to the listeners as well, because I'm sure we've got some listeners that are facing some version of that challenge and would love support in that area.
Awesome. I will. I'll let you know.
You can connect with Shannon by following her on Instagram. She's at Shannon K. Miles. And of course, there'll be links in the show notes. Or connect with her via the Third Option on Instagram as well, at My Third Option. Be sure to check out the info from Shannon's book over at mythirdoption.com, or check out belaysolutions.com to find out more about working with their company, Belay. They're actually looking to hire great people now as virtual assistants. So if you're interested in maybe pursuing that as your third option, go there and apply to join the team. Shannon, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be on this interview, and I hope that it helps somebody who's feeling a little stuck, a little uneasy maybe in what they're doing, to just make a change. And life is really short, and it's such a cliche to say it, but it's true. I would say to the listener, get your ducks in a row and go for it.
Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Go over to facebook.com/inspired stewardship and like our Facebook page and mark it
that you'd like to get notifications from us so that we can connect with you on Facebook and make sure that we're serving you to the best of our abilities with time and tips there. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.